family and fellow soldiers. I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
Vice President Kamala Harris is making a renewed pitch to a key voting bloc, young black men. Yesterday, the vice president laid out how her economic plan can help that community during an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists held in Philadelphia. It comes as polls show that Donald Trump has gained some ground with that group.
I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Our young black men, our black men, just like any group of people, anybody, our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy overall. And when they do better economically, we all do better.
Joining us now, White House correspondent for Politico and co-author of the playbook, Eugene Daniels. Eugene was one of those conducting that interview yesterday, one of the moderators there with the vice president. Eugene, nice job yesterday.
Thank you.
So let's start there with this idea of young black men. We know that Donald Trump has spent some time trying to make inroads there. What are the latest in terms of the polls say? Is he being successful? And what is the vice president doing to try to win their support, as she said, particularly on issues of like affordability?
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting with Donald Trump is the way that he does it. It kind of shows a party, a man who is kind of engaging with people they don't typically do, right? They do it in sometimes kind of clumsy ways. There's like the shiny shoes, there's these rappers, and that's kind of the view of which they go when they go and talk to black male voters. But some of it's working, right? The polls are kind of all over the place. So it's unclear how it would work out. And when you talk to black advocates and honestly black pollsters, they say it's hard to talk to and figure out how to poll black men specifically and the black population in general. So that's one thing that folks, when they look at these polls, should take into account. For Vice President Harris, since she was just vice president and running mate, right, and not the top of the ticket, she's been meeting with black men. She's brought them to the vice president's residence, and from there kind of birthed this economic tour, economic opportunity tour that she took on that was about black men. She had this huge round table with black men about capital for entrepreneurship. And so there are ways in which she's talking about it, but even in that clip, she zooms out even more and talks about how if you help kind of the most marginalized communities in this country, all the boats rise. And I think that is kind of where their focus is. So she's talking about affordability. She's talking about they want to be entrepreneurs. And she has said in the past she wants the folks to get out of their way, help them, give them the tools, but not baby them because, you know, black men don't want that or need it.
No.
Is it just me, or does anyone remember Roly-Poly Martin saying that the Democrats didn't need to waste their time reaching out to young black voters because they ain't gonna do a damn thing, as he put it? He wasn't talking about black male voters at all during the run-up to the 2020 election. But the memo must have gone out from DNC headquarters, along with that latest batch of butter biscuits, because Rowley's suddenly taken an interest in black male voters. Apparently he's had some sort of epiphany. I guess they must have seen the latest internal polls for Kamala Harris's campaign, and her black support's looking more than a little mushy at this point. It's downright watery. Now, you know what I want to see as a black male voter? I want to see Kamala Harris do some more of her pathetic sister girl routine. I haven't had a good laugh in a while. I want to see her talking about making collard greens by washing the greens in a bathtub. I mean, it couldn't be more comedic how phony this heifer is. She has no connection with us whatsoever. She knows nothing about us and is too intellectually lazy to even find out. Now, you probably noticed in the clip that I just played for you, what's interesting is what they didn't say. Notice they didn't say anything about crime or prison. Notice that? Yeah, whenever talking about black men in particular, the Democrats and the white media always make sure you say something about crime. Make sure you mention crime. That's what we want to associate with these black men. It's all about crime, you know. They didn't do that this time. I guess that memo must have gone out too. Instead, they talked about affordability, whatever that's supposed to mean. So that tells you that they understand their talking points have been the problem, but that doesn't mean they're going to change their tune. And another lesson here is that all of the staged, phony PR stunts that Kamala Harris's people have set up, like those ridiculous barbershop stage plays that she did for the cameras, where she pretended to be talking to some black men, and they were pretending to act as if they were asking her serious questions, that was all just a lie that didn't fool anyone. I've been around the block more than a little bit now. I've been an observer of America's political cycles going back to the late 1980s. Yes, I'm that old. And one of the things I've always been an observer of is how politicians craft their image, and they do that through the extensive use of controlled environments. Whenever you see the Democrats or the Republicans conducting these so-called town halls and such, have you ever noticed how many of the people that are there are actually political volunteers, and a number of them are actually donors? It's true. How many of the people in these crowds or at the rope lines are actually members of the county Democratic Party? The Republicans do the exact same thing, by the way. Go back on this very channel and rewatch my now classic video, Why Roger Ailes Isn't Going Away, so you can see how Roger Ailes did that for Richard Nixon back in the 1960s. But I'm serious here. The white media doesn't tell you this about the crowds at these events. You see politicians shaking hands with someone at the rope line, and it turns out it's Monica Lewinsky. That's what they do. They have party activists and even campaign staffers there acting for the cameras as if they're just random folks off the streets. Occasionally, when things go wrong or some scandal or other breaks out, the identities of these plants becomes public, but most of the time it doesn't. That's what I want you to understand about Kamala Harris's little barber shop chats. Make no mistake, though, if you see these politicians talking to someone and they're not giving them that business and the politician isn't on the hot seat, it's staged. It's fake. When the Black Lives Matter protesters back in 2016 got started, candidate Hillary Clinton got some flack for her blatant attempts to ignore young black voters. That was 3 election cycles ago. So what did her white Democratic strategists decide to do? They decided that they would have an incident where some phony pretend activists or individuals who, in my opinion, were far from sincere, they would make some noise at one of her little rallies, and then candidate Clinton would pretend to be so moved by these young black people that she wanted to speak with them in private. But predictably, these plants were not making any demands of Hillary. Instead, they said some meaningless gibberish, the usual canned talking points. They wanted her to feel their passion, etc. This was staged as hell, in my opinion. And even if you do want to believe that it wasn't staged, you have to admit it didn't accomplish anything. But this is what the major parties do. Especially the Democrats. They want to put out some staged PR event, something controlled and stage managed, so that they can have the white media broadcast it, post it online, and then falsely claim, see, we sat down with some of these black people and we listened to them and they told us that they're not happy. See, they said they're not happy and we told them we're going to take care of it, and they nodded their heads and said, we believe you, and now you can go ahead and say that you've been heard. Told you about that headline too, haven't I? About the white media claiming falsely that black voters have been hurt. Black men have been leading the charge to put the Democrats on notice that the black vote is getting on code. Black men have been adamant and strident about this, and that's why, for the first time in decades, you've seen this hyper-aggressive effort on behalf of the white media to try to pander to black women instead. That's been a ploy on their part. Insincere, but that's what they've been trying to do. Some sort of political counter move. They've been playing all the DNC's greatest hits on that one too, putting a black woman on the Supreme Court, which hasn't done anything for black women at all. Making a black woman UN ambassador, again, that's done more for Israel than it has anybody else. They've given plenty of face time to Kristen Clark, so we can see how many anti-black hate crimes she's been letting slip through the cracks. Black people are demanding equal opportunity, but all the Biden-Harris administration has offered is a photo opportunity. But they've had shills and plants trying to schmooze black women, telling black women all these flattering lies that they love black women and black women are the backbone of the party, etc. All this stuff to try to drive a wedge like they did in the 60s, trying to see if that old playbook will still fly in the 21st. Problem is, there's a new black media out here, and one of the things we've asked any of the black women who might choose to be susceptible to this propaganda is to ask the Democrats, what are they going to do for black women if they care about black women so much? They haven't done anything. So if they're so concerned about black women, why haven't they done anything about these race soldiers like the ones who killed Sandra Bland, Matrice Richardson, Breonna Taylor, or Sonia Massey? Black women are the leading victims of maternal mortality in the U.S. These white supremacists have made it where, for black women in America, merely trying to have a child becomes a death sentence. The same white doctors, and in many cases immigrant physicians, who successfully deliver babies for every other group of women and who successfully keep these white and Hispanic and Asian mothers from dying during or after childbirth, suddenly when it comes to black mothers, they forget all their medical training and skill, and their black patients routinely die. And the same for the black infant mortality rate. Republicans talk all the time about cultivating a culture of life, and even though abortion is a contentious political issue, infant mortality is not. It's an easy win for the conservatives, or at least it would be if they focused on eliminating infant mortality. In the U.S., it shouldn't happen at all. But it's when you look at who the predominant victims of infant mortality are, you realize why the white right doesn't care about dead babies in this case. Because the dead babies are black. So for the white right, by fighting abortion, they get to have their cake and eat it too. They can have more white babies born, and don't worry about there being more black babies born because the doctors take care of killing them and their mothers. Now here you have a major issue that affects black women, and Democrats don't even care about it. But you want to know who else the infant and maternal mortality rates affect? Black fathers and husbands. I had one of my listeners, Ogun Spirit. He lost an infant son because the hospital staff claimed that the baby suddenly started suffering respiratory distress. I did an entire video about it, and those kinds of stories make me furious as hell. But I know I'm not alone. Legacy matters to black men, but it's precisely that legacy white supremacy wants to eliminate, so neither of the major parties says a word about the infant mortality rate or the maternal mortality rate. This deliberate state-sponsored racial policy of genocide has affected untold millions of black men and the women and children they care about. And we haven't even gotten to the racial disparity in healthcare in general, which, by the way, that disproportionately affects black men. Who do you think are the main ones dying from stress-related maladies? But you know who else doesn't care about it? Kamala Harris. Democrats talk a lot of hot air about healthcare and disparate outcomes, but when they're in power, they do zilch about it. So even black women have seen through the DNC scam. The old game of trying to pander, work one against the other, both sides against the middle. No matter how many shills and plants they throw out here, it's not working like it used to. Trying to sidestep the demands of black men by pandering to black women hasn't worked because black women have been getting on code. So now the Democrats have been forced at long last to address the black elephant in the room. No matter how rosy a picture the white media's tried to paint, Kamala Harris hasn't been getting black men's support, and she's admitting it. And I noticed that in this case, you didn't have the white media pathetically trying to bring up her white husband. That tired talking point that black men don't like her white husband, that's hood rat talk. Spinning fairy tales claiming that black men are jealous because she's got a white husband. Ain't no black man out here pining away for Kamala Harris except for low-down Willie Brown. And there's no black man worthy of the name who wants to be that chump. Kamala Harris is trying to pull the same old con game that the Democrats did before. She's hoping people have forgotten how she laughed and cackled like a witch when she weaponized the truancy laws to go after black mothers, including homeless ones. And when she was a DA, every time she talked about prosecuting people, that just tickled her no end. She laughed her butt off about it. She is sick. She was having fun when she got to use her office to go after black people. But when it came time to talk about the police and the San Francisco cops are as racist and corrupt as the LAPD, she didn't laugh about prosecuting them. In fact, she wouldn't even talk about the cops. She covered up police misconduct. I did a number of videos about that, and I'll be reposting them in the near future. So all the propaganda the DNC's been pumping out there, hoping to woo black women as a way to circumvent the pressure black men have put on them, has failed. And now the black women are turning on them. Their goal was to make black male voters irrelevant, or to convince us that we were, and then they hoped just enough of us would start to buckle because sadly a lot of weak-willed black males can be counted on to fold like hot laundry, and they figured that we'd just go back to picking the cotton. So at this point, I'm guessing the Democrats have run out of barber shops to hang out at. Now, speaking of tactics that don't work, this guy who the white host is talking to, Eugene Daniels, why aren't they talking to the black men who are saying that they're not going to vote for Kamala Harris? Why don't they talk to the young black men who are saying we ain't voting for her? Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, they're not doing it because they don't want to actually have young black men's objections on the record, because then it puts those demands into the political arena, and it also would force Kamala Harris and the DNC to admit they're not about to do any of the things that these young black men are demanding. Right now, they get to sit there and push this narrative that, well, black men in particular, all they care about is prison and the prison industrial complex, and they care about going to jail. That's what black men care about, so that's all that really matters. They're not talking about economic empowerment because they don't intend to do anything about it. They have to keep that out of the discourse. So instead, we get these meaningless, empty words like affordability, which Eugene Daniels doesn't even try to define because the word doesn't mean anything. It's empty fluff. It can mean whatever you want it to, but the one thing it's not going to mean is black empowerment. Now, Daniels did raise a valid point when he said that Trump is doing silly stuff like shiny sneakers, talking to rappers and such. But my question is, what is Kamala Harris doing? She's talking to Meg the Stallion, Beyonce, dancing to Cardi B, get your booty to the polls, and talking about washing collard greens in the bathtub. So Kamala Harris is also talking to rappers, raunchy, trashy ones, which Eugene Daniels conveniently forgot to mention. So she's doing the exact same clumsy engagement that Trump does, only she's doing more of it. So was this little piece that they did on Way Too Early, is this really about them trying to find out why are young black male voters not voting for Kamala, or is this their own clumsy attempt at trying to do some image rehab of her? And just for good measure, this guy actually had the gall to recycle the lift all boats nonsense. At this late date, they're still pulling that one out because they have no new ideas. But they saved the worst for last. At the very end of the clip, Daniels mentions something that does matter. Reparations.
When she talked about when she talked about whether it was Springfield or reparations or black men in the economy or earning their vote, she also always navigated to talking about the rest of the American people.
But he doesn't tell us anything that was actually said. He just name-dropped reparations and immediately scurried on. Now, this National Association of Black Journalists meeting that Kamala Harris talked at took place on Tuesday. This was weeks after the huge fiasco about reparations in her home state of California took place, and now she's being asked about reparations. Okay, and what did Kamala say on the issue of reparations? Because Daniels didn't say anything about it. According to NBC News, the network Daniels works for, quote, Harris avoided answering a question about whether she would issue an executive order to create a commission to study reparations. Ultimately, she said it would come down to Congress. An answer that seemed to deflate some of the attendees. So there you have it. Daniels mentions reparations as if Kamala had brought it up, but she didn't. So she didn't talk about reparations at all, other than to say, hand it over to Congress. Well, we already know about the much ballyhooed Police Accountability Commission that Biden and Harris said that they were going to put in the White House during their 2020 campaign. Remember what became of that? Before they even took office, they were already saying, we're too busy to do that whole White House level Police Accountability Commission thing, so instead let Congress handle it. And we haven't heard a word about that Police Accountability Commission since. So, do you truly believe that a President Kamala Harris, even if she did say, you know what, I think that I would issue an executive order to at least study reparations, do you actually think that she would do it? But this also exposes the National Association of Black Journalists too. They're against reparations as well. Just look at their question. Their question was on whether Kamala would be in favor of another study. So there's that word again. Here we are, weeks after the black grassroots knocked down that study stalling tactic, and Gavin Newsom's desperately trying to resurrect that ploy. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is asked about whether she's in favor of a study, and she won't even go that far. She's not even willing to discuss a study. So for those of you who think that Gavin Newsom's bad on this issue, and he's horrendous, Kamala Harris is actually worse, if such a thing was possible. Well, at the very least, she's remaining consistent on her opposition to reparations, as the black media told you. The National Association of Black Journalists are just a bunch of the same old bootlicks and boule butt kissers, and yet this is the impact that the black grassroots has had on the political discourse. We have forced cash reparations into the conversation. These bootlick scumbags are being forced to follow our lead, but since they're controlled opposition, their job is to protect Massa and his minions. So that was what Kamala Harris had to say to the so-called black journalist about reparations. But how many of these black journalists came to you and told you what I have? Not one of them. Now, for the shills and plants and DNC operatives, please tell me how Kamala's stance on reparations is any different than Donald Trump's. Over here, we're one-issue voters. Cash reparations or no vote. Both Trump and Kamala Harris refuse to even discuss the issue, and for Kamala, even a study is too much. She's opposed to what we all recognize to be a do-nothing tactic, but even that for her is too much. That's too close to the issue. But our pal Sweet Cheeks Daniels, he doesn't tell you that, did he? Say, anyone know if he's related to Lee Daniels? I'm just asking for a friend. This is the unthreatening Negro that they put on camera to be their expert about black men. I mean, just look at this guy. Talk about sending the wrong messenger. What black man in their right mind identifies with this chump? And it certainly doesn't help that they have video of him shaking hands with Kamala Harris.
Luckily, we had so much time with her. We pushed how much time we had with her to the brink. Her team was like peaking, trying to get us to cut it out.
How is a man who's clearly trying to be her buddy gonna hold her feet to the fire? Answer, he won't, because that's not what he's there for. This is the same network, by the way, where Tiffany Cross called herself lecturing black men over our political demands and talking to us like she thinks that we're her galley slaves or something. And just to put a point on it, she said black men need to get in line. So we have Mammy on the plantation doing Massa's bidding and telling the unruly male slaves they better get in line and obey Massa. And this is the network who wants to speculate on why young black men don't want to vote for Kamala Harris. It's because we judge people by the company they keep. All these Democrats come to black people with insults, abuse, and demands, like we're their pets. Obama does nothing for us for 8 years and then has the nerve to say he'll consider it a personal insult if we don't obey him and vote for Hillary. And Hillary says the 94 crime bill was all black people's fault because, well, black people needed to be saved from themselves. By the way, just how did all that lecturing and finger-wagging at black men work out for Tiffany Cross? Did she get that job at the White House that she was hoping for? Did all of her shameless bootlicking and butt-kissing result in her going to D.C.? Hell, does she still have a job at MSNBC for that matter? All it took was one comment from Tucker Carlson, and Tiffany Cross was unemployed. MSNBC has more regard for a racist white Republican than they do for a loyal, butt-kissing mammy like her. Tiffany Cross got in line, and then they showed her the door. And by the way, Simone Sanders didn't resign in protest of this. Neither did Jonathan Putin on his Capehart or anyone else at MSNBC. No honor among sleaze. This asinine attempt to wallpaper over the massive cracks that they have in black support isn't going to work. Talking around our demands is only going to antagonize us further. Kamala's entire strategy is just like Obama. Bluff her way past the black vote by using vague, meaningless chatter, phrases that can mean whatever the listener wants them to mean, but don't actually mean anything at all because she doesn't define it. Just let the voters believe whatever they want, and then afterwards tell the voters you can't please everyone, when in reality, you were never trying to please them in the first place. Elections are transactional, quid pro quo, something for something. You tell us what of monetary value we're going to get, and in return we give you a parking space in front of the White House. That's how it's supposed to work. But where black people are concerned, it's been completely backwards. We give them our vote first, and in return, we get slapped in the face. We're demanding cash reparations. And what is Kamala Harris offering us? Vibes. Well, I don't know about you, but I can't pay my bills with vibes, and I can't pursue or promote an economic empowerment agenda with vibes either. All these other groups, they get checks, they get money. Right now, Democrats in California are trying to scheme how they can reinflate that whole illegal aliens home ownership loan scam. Kamala Harris needs black voters if she's going to win the presidency. And no matter how many times the white media claims Kamala has yet again had a jump in the polls, she still hasn't overtaken Trump after 2 months. She may think that those white dark money donors who have given her tens of millions of dollars are all she needs to make it to the White House. But there was another female candidate who also thought that big money donors was all she needed too. And it was a lack of black support that cost Hillary Clinton the White House. So the name of the game is consistency here. All the pro-Kamala propaganda has only highlighted how important we are, because we've begun to discipline our vote. The white media can try to ignore us as best they can, but reality always has the last word. They haven't talked this much about black voters in forever. And why is this happening? It's not because we've thrown our support behind a candidate, but precisely because we have withheld our support. Everyone's used to black voters being the biggest political cheerleaders out there, with some idiot talking about Dr. King or the civil rights movement and always falsely associating that movement with whatever Democrat is running for office this year. But we stopped that noise, and our silence has been deafening. Their attempts to have some Caribbean or African immigrants speak for us has fallen flat. They won't import in some person from Nigeria or Ghana or Jamaica or Haiti and have them try to lay claim to our history so as to prop up their DNC paymasters. We've robbed the tethers of their thin veneer of legitimacy that they needed in order to operate. Now we have to intensify that pressure so we can solidify that no one speaks for us except us. No one can mention our history. No one can invoke our struggle except us. No more letting every Tom, Dick, and Harry with the requisite amount of melanin ride the coattails of our history and our lineage any longer. Kamala Harris and her supporters are slowly waking up to the fact that it's a brand new day, and Kamala can either accede to our demands, or in a couple of months, she'll most likely be finding herself getting an early start on her new career of giving post-White House speaking engagements. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Liban Gurhan, Kenneth Prescia, Jimmy Whitfield, Wesley Monroe, and Black Voltron Reloaded. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.